Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to go over Registax.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I'm not in my work truck today. I am at my house, tucked away into a very little small corner with this photography thing I have from back in the day blocking all the crap behind me. You know, just got back from Florida, a little bit tanner, but today we're going to go over Registax. We'll open up the file that we did on the last video. Okay, so now you look over, when you open up the file, it skips Align, stack, and goes straight to the wavelets. So what you'll notice is we're on the Gaussian wavelet filter setting. You see denoise, sharpen, layers 1 through 6, and then on the right we have histogram, gamma, a whole bunch of other stuff you don't need. Rgb Align and Rgb Balance are going to be the two you most likely need over anything else. What do we have? So we have the stacked image with no other processing done to it. So the wavelets, they target different sizes of pixels from my understanding, and that's just from using other programs that also have wavelets. They have the signal is from smallest detail to largest detail. So by going off of what the other programs show, we can assume, or I assume, that this program works the very same, where you have layer 1 that deals with the smallest details and layer 6 which deals with the largest details. If you click on these preview boxes, you can see from layer 1 to layer 6, like, and I can't use the mouse while I'm holding the preview down, but if you look at the cloud bands and the moon shadow on Jupiter for reference, you really can't see the cloud bands all that much. You can see the shadow of the moon, and you can even begin to see the actual moon itself. If you go to layer 6, you can clearly see the moon, the shadow of the moon, and the cloud bands. So what do all these things do? Well, just like all the other data that we've used so far, you just have to experiment. So let's just experiment. So if we do layer 1, we'll move it up. Oh, you can start to see how it's starting to bring out that detail, but it's also bringing out a whole lot of color noise with it. Let's go to 100, see what happens. Ooh, yeah, you can see you got that circle there, that circle there. There's the shadow of the moon. There's the moon itself. I don't like that. Let's get rid of that. So if you right click to reset, it takes it back down to 0. Let's try layer 2. Push layer 2 a little bit further before we start to get noise artifacts. And before I get too involved with this, there's really not that good of a how-to on how to do this. Registax as a program is like 10 years old. There's a fine line between making a picture pretty and having scientifically viable data. So if you're going after scientifically viable data, I would highly suggest look at Damian Peach or Chris Go. Christopher Go has a tutorial that he did with Woodland Hills. I'll link it in the description below. You can watch how he does it. But at the same time, both of them guys use C14s and a whole lot more stable seeing conditions. That's just something that you're going to have to decide if you want, scientifically viable data, or if you want a pretty picture for social media. That being said, let's keep going. So move the sliders, go to 100. Oof, a lot of grain. Okay, well, let's just say you don't want to go to 100, but you need a little bit more pop out of the image. Well, that's where the sharpen and denoise arrows come into play. If I want, let's say I don't want to move the slider all that much, but if I come over here to this sharpen arrow and click up on it, now you can see we're getting sharper detail and we're only at 23%. So now if we move the slider up, ooh, that's a whole lot of color noise. Well, if there's only something we can do about that, well, there is. We just hit this denoise arrow. Now the denoise arrow, if you're familiar with Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop, and if you add noise reduction, it'll take away that color noise reduction, but it also kind of smears the details a little bit. So there's a trade-off of how much you want to sharpen versus how much denoise you want to use, or that all that's going to result in how sharp or fuzzy your final image looks. That's a good stopping place for now. So if you come over here to the check mark, you can click on and off the layer and see what you've got so far. So you can see we started with the blurry mess we got, and now it's a little bit sharper, a little bit more detail starting to pop out, so on and so forth. I kind of like where it is right there, so we'll leave that one there and we'll go to the next one. That's not too bad. Let's see if we can crank up, sharpen a little bit. Alright, so now you're starting to get the darker gas spots in the equatorial band. But you can also see we're starting to bring back a lot of that color noise. We'll go up a little bit more with this, bring the slider down, and give it a little bit of denoise. I can live with that. Turning the layer on and off will help you to fine tune each layer individually. And just for the record, I normally don't use layer 4 and 5, or I really don't ever use 3, 4, and 5. I usually stick to 1, 2, and 6. But for the sake of the tutorial, we'll go through each one individually. And you notice you'll reach a certain point where you really can't tell what all is changing, so you have to look in the variations of exposure between the darker spots, the lighter spots, the midtones, and all that. So if you look at the north equatorial band right here, especially this middle dark spot right here, I have to lean in a little bit because I got this big old circle light right here. But if you look in the equatorial bands, you can see it added a little bit, but it also added a whole lot of color noise. So I really don't want to use that layer, and I'm too lazy to reset it, so I'll just turn it off and leave it off. Ooh, that popped out a lot of nice detail, but man, it looks bad. You can see it sharpened it up quite nice, but all that color noise is still there. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to about half. I can live with that. I'm really not talking all that much because this, I mean, it's just repetitive over and over. You go 1 through 6 and you move the slider and you up the sharpen and up the denoise and down the sharpen and move the slider back down, and you just do it all back and over and over and over. But now that we've gone through all 6, I'll go back to 1 just to be sure I didn't miss anything. Nope, still noisy as hell. Now let's just say you get to a point, you love it, and you took your 3 to 5 to 8 sequences for WinJupos, or you're doing an animation and you want everything to be the same. Well, what you can do is you can save these settings as a scheme. Then I can come in later, load that scheme, and it'll make all those numbers just reappear magically again. It comes in handy whenever you're doing several sequences or you're doing an animation. Instead of having to write down your settings or whatever, you just save it, click that button, and apply it to each of them whenever you bring them in. So we're pretty much done over here on the left hand side. So we'll look over here at these settings. Histogram, I mean, you can change it if you want to. Brighten it up a little bit. Okay, that's fine. See, now you can start seeing that moon pop out right there. Gamma I usually don't mess with. Flip and rotate is what it says it is. Turn them back to 0. Rgb Align and Rgb Balance. So Rgb Align, so in color cameras, whenever the light from the planet comes through the atmosphere, a lot of times the blue and the red channels don't line up just right. And so what'll happen is you'll have a shift of, it might be 1 or 2 pixels, but you'll see, your red is more on one, it's more red on one side and more blue on the other side. By Rgb Align, you can either manually change those, and here I'll go extreme so you can see what I'm talking about. So now you can see the red limb and the blue limb. Or what you can do is you could take this box and select, part of the planet, the whole planet, one side or the other, whatever, and you can hit estimate, and it will automatically, or attempt to automatically, align all of those color channels again. And you can see here it actually did move them, and it failed miserably because now we have a red limb and a blue limb. So we'll just reset it and close out. Rgb Balance. So what Rgb Balance will do is it will balance all of the colors to get them as close to equal as possible. That's it. Click of a button. We'll go ahead and leave it balanced for the tutorial. There's a better way to do that in Photoshop that was on Dylan O'Donnell's YouTube channel, but we can go through that whenever we do the WinJupos tutorial. Denoise and de-ringing. De-ringing can come in handy if you don't have Photoshop. You can try to mess with it. A lot of times it will just smear detail and it won't come out the way you're expecting it to come out. Denoise does just what it does. Slide it up, gets rid of the noise, but it also gets rid of a lot of detail. Turn that off. I really don't mess with any of this other stuff. Contrast and brightness, does what it does. And what you're left with is this picture of a planet, albeit kind of grainy and really noisy in this instance, but work with what we got for now. This is just another one of the areas that you will have to experiment on, and it will take time, but you'll eventually streamline the process to where you can acquire the data, do the processing, and post to the internet within a matter of hours. But anyway, that's Registax. If you have any questions or comments or concerns or critiques, I encourage you to leave them in the comment section below. As always, sharing is appreciated. These videos are meant to be free for everybody to enjoy. I hope that you're enjoying them. Obviously, if you Googled Registax tutorial, you came to a very specific place of the internet, so I appreciate you checking this video out. I'll just ask you the same 2 favors I always ask. And number 1, that's to share and give the information freely. If anybody were to ask you, you can just reiterate what you learned in this video or point them in this direction, whichever one. And also, if you do plan on upgrading or getting into astronomy or astrophotography, I have an OPT affiliate link that I'll leave down in the description below. You can just click on that and it takes you to the OPT page. You can search and buy just like normal. The only difference is I'll get a little small commission from the deal that I can use to buy new astronomy stuff, or maybe better lighting, for these videos, bigger room. Also failed to mention that whenever you do get done, you need to hit do all. So go ahead and do that now. And that has been Registax. I guess in the order of operations, we can do Photoshop / WinJupos next. That'll be it. So until then, I'll see y'all later.
Am I back? Or are you back?
Nobody's back. You're saying welcome back to my channel.
Well, I don't have a channel.
You're pretending that you're me.